During my time in Roe, I drowned a total of 25 times, one on-purpose drowning for every summer solstice that I had been alive on this God's-graced earth, and a few mostly by accident drownings done on my own time. Every summer solstice dawn, my head was pushed into the water by my father, the priest. It was a sight to see, a holiday affair. Roe got done up proper. The girls all wore flowers in their hair, and while dirty river water and silt flooded into my lungs, the townsfolk sang me drowning songs. On the dawn of my 22nd solstice, I walked with my father to the river. The town was already gathered there, and as we approached, they raised their voices to sing. I stepped into the river, and my father followed. He did not speak to me, or even look at me. When he reached the deepest part of the river, he took hold of me and pushed me gently beneath the water until it covered my nose, my face. The surface world went quiet, and I could not hear the singing anymore, but for a distant hum. I knew this would not be my end. I knew I would survive this. But this year, like every year, animal panic and a certain hidden rage became known to me. I fought my father, I'm ashamed to say. I clawed at his arms and drew blood with my nails. I thrashed and kicked his unyielding legs, and all the while the town sang. Still, though I clung piteously to my life, I drowned. The great mouth of the beyond swallowed me whole, and I was welcomed into darkness. My father told no one in Roe about the dreams at first. God sent them, he was pretty sure. She, in all her wisdom and mercy, had told him to drown his sweet baby girl Adeline in the river, the birth of whom had made a widower of him. Now, my father was a sensible man. He told himself this was no prophecy, but visions from his grief. He wouldn't fall to this madness. He was pious enough to think he knew his God and the ways in which she worked. Surely she would never ask him to kill his only child. Life got harder for my father. He broke his leg while working the fields, and it healed crooked. Preaching and priesting wasn't paying enough to fill one belly, let alone two. Not to mention the town of Roe became a worse place to live day by day. There was a sickness that seemed never to lift. There were 3 stillborn births all in the month of April, which was a lot for a town of that size. And while the harvest months were fast approaching, no farmer had any high hopes for it. So, to wrap it up, my father was destitute, hungry, freshly widowed, hobbled, and plagued with dreams telling him to drown his daughter for the favor of God. It turned out to be easy enough for her to break a desperate man. The first time he drowned me, he did so in secret. He was drunk, I believe. At dawn, he went to the river, held his little girl down in the water until she went still, then let her body float away. He stumbled home and drank himself to sleep, only to wake to half the town hollering at his door. They'd found me, you see, washed up on the riverbank. I was alive again. The story came out after that, of course. My father, driven out of his head with relief that his daughter was still alive, told the people of Roe about the dreams. He said God told him to drown Adeline, and could he please see her and hold her in his arms, his perfect, sainted girl. They thought he was mad and decided it would be best to hang him. But God has a flair for the dramatic. Just as they were walking my father to the noose, 3 miracles did occur. The first was that my father's crooked leg straightened with a god-awful crack. The second was that the Peterson farm, racked with the worst sorts of misfortune imaginable, recovered from its blight within the blink of an eye. The third was that Ann Hart's newborn baby, thought to be dead, opened its eyes and began to cry. The town was saved. Perhaps the mad priest was right. They let him go. They let me go back home with him. My father's dream sure as hell didn't stop, though. So for the next 21 years, the town of Roe was a prosperous, graced place. There was no sickness to speak of. Its babies were born healthy and strong. The harvest was bountiful. But only if, every year, my daddy drowned me. This time when I crawled out of the river, wiping mud out of my eyes, I was about half a mile out of town, which was loud with celebration and all manner of revelry. I walked back barefoot, and made my way to the church. It was the largest building in Roe, built in honor of my 10th drowning. My father was waiting for me inside. He looked relieved to see me. Like every year, he was worried he was finally my killer. He kissed my forehead, uncaring of the mud, and told me to get cleaned up and join the dancing and the feasting. The rest of the town was there as well. The people of Roe did not speak to me much as a rule, but neither did they shun me. On drowning days, they were even joyful around me and let me play with their children. I went and washed up, but I kept my hair unbound and my feet bare. Today, the town of Roe treated me like God herself, so I dressed like a wild thing and danced with every girl who let me. My appetites were no secret to the town. They had made peace with my strangeness on account of how I was their precious drowned saint. And if I chose to dance with the women of the town, then they could look the other way, morally speaking. I danced with Dorothy and June, who was pregnant with her first child at the time, and Lucy and Henrietta. June let me dance with her the longest, and later that night we slipped away to the church attic, and I kissed her and took off her dress. She was far enough into her pregnancy that her belly was swollen pretty big, so I had to lay her on the table so I could bring her off with my hand. Not far into this, June suddenly sat up and confessed to me. She had not felt her baby move in more than a week, and was afraid that it had died in her womb. She was sure my drowning earlier that day would bring it back, as there had not been a single stillborn birth in Roe for 21 years. But just in case, could I please use my mouth and grace both of them with God's favor? I told her that sounded pretty serious, and shouldn't she have told the doctor or my father the priest, and not me? I wasn't any kind of healer after all, but June was insistent and fearful, as only a soon-to-be mother could be. I could say no more to her honest distress, so in God's name, I put my mouth between her legs and did my best to send a prayer. It was late when I returned home, but my father was still awake and writing his sermons. He didn't sleep much anymore. As a child, I used to hear him howling and pleading nightly, but lately I heard him less and less. Either his visions got kinder with him, or he had simply seen enough of them to not be afraid any longer. I asked him once what God sounded like, for though I was her saint, she'd never once spoken to me, not even in the grim darkness of my many deaths. My father told me her voice was like thunder, like chasms, like fire and ice together, and when she spoke to him, it felt like being torn apart. And when he woke, he often could not remember who he was or where he came from. I learned after that never to ask him about his dreams. The house we lived in now was much larger and much nicer than the one we'd lived in when I was born. The town of Roe built my father a house to thank him for all his holy doings and for gracing the town, and I suppose to thank me as well for being drowned. I told my father what June had told me and what I did for her. I did not spare him much detail. He grimaced, but did not tell me to hold my tongue. When I recited to him the prayer I had said over June's womb, he looked troubled. Whatever child to be born of this, he said, would be God touched. He did not say this as if it were a good thing. He would be a fool to do so. God's touch may have saved this town, but it also made a martyr out of me, and it hollowed out a good man. It was possible I had doomed this child, as well as saved it. That night I heard my father cry in his sleep. Could not make out the words, and I did not wish to. Oftentimes I heard him scream my name as he was tormented by whatever agony he saw for me. I could not abide that. I covered my ears and hummed my drowning songs until sleep found me again. June's child was born healthy and hale on the cusp of fall, just as the leaves were beginning to turn. Her name was Felicity. My father, when he heard what the child was to be called, went white as a sheet. I was the only one to see this and know it for what it meant. My father had dreamt of Felicity. He knew that she was to be drowned, just as I was. I don't remember my first 3 drownings, but I remember my 4th. That's when I knew enough, you see, to be afraid of my father. He dragged me to the river while the whole town sang, his fingers of ice around my wrist when not 1 hour earlier he'd made me breakfast and tied ribbons in my hair. This was the first time I remembered seeing the darkness, seeing my death. No one was there to greet me when I washed up on the river bank. I stood out of the water, lost and confused. Even as a child, I sensed that a great betrayal had been done to me. My dress was sodden, and although it was the height of summer, I quickly became chilled to the bone. I was too shocked even to cry. When my father found me, he lifted me up in his arms. His voice shook, I recall, as he begged my forgiveness. It was the first time anyone had asked me such a thing. I do not remember what I said. He never asked me again. He knew the answer I would give him. When my father went to visit June and her new baby, I went with him. My father recited the prayer of grace over Felicity, and then went to speak with June's husband while I stayed with June. She glowed all over with happiness and pride, and once her husband and my father were out of the room, she laid Felicity in my arms. I was immediately in awe. I said, "Hello. Hello, my sweet one." June's eyes shone bright as she watched us. She thanked me for all I had done to help her bring this little girl into the world. She kissed her baby, and then, almost shyly, she kissed me and called me her dearest Addie. And so I became the child's godmother. For the last 21 years, Roe had seen nothing but mild winters. It snowed some months, but spring always went off without a hitch. This was generally believed to be my doing, for the winters preceding my first drowning had been harsh, bitter things, with blizzards that blanketed the town for weeks on end. The winter after Felicity was born was as severe as any in Roe had ever seen. The river froze solid, and it snowed so much that there were days my father and I could not even shove open our front door. When my father could not go to church, he paced all day in his study. It was all I could do to get him to sit down and take a small meal. He grew thin and pale, and often suffered coughing fits. It was the first time I'd ever seen him sick. It was not just my father. Several people in Roe sickened. The elderly grew weak, and a few of the children, too. When I came into town, I would often spy the townsfolk giving me dirty looks, as if every misfortune was mine to repent for. My father dreamed every night that winter. I would wake to him screaming, his voice one with the howling wind. Over and over he would beg God's mercy. I heard him plead for me, and I heard him plead for Felicity. I visited June and Felicity as often as I could, for they were the only people in Roe, apart from my father, who liked me even when it was not a drowning day. June's husband tolerated my visits well enough, though he sometimes gave me looks of resentment and jealousy, and would find some place else to be when I was there. That suited me fine. Felicity was growing to be as bright and clever as her mother. I did not want to break this happiness, this love. I had been given so little of it all my years, and I was greedy for it. So I said nothing to June of my father's visions and what I believed they meant. For this sin, and this sin alone, I do seek repentance. Up until the very end, I wanted my father to be stronger than he was, braver than he was. Until Felicity, he was all I had. In his sermons, he spoke of the drowned saint of Roe with priestly reverence. But at home, he was only my father. He loved me, and I loved him. That night, he went to drown Felicity. He left me resting by the fire. I suspect he slipped something into my tea to make me sleep, for he knew I kept watch on him. When I woke up, the door was left open. My father was gone. The snow fell heavy and thick outside, but my father's footprints remained uncovered. They led to June's house. I followed them as quickly as I could, fighting the wind which blew straight at me with a mighty fury, but God herself was standing in my path. By the time I made it to June's house, my father had already taken Felicity. June fell upon me, overcome with fear for her child. A bruise swelled on the side of her face where my father had struck her. I looked farther into the room. There stood Felicity's father. He was calm and cool, and I knew then that he had allowed my father to take his little girl from him, that he had done nothing. Perhaps even thought that having a saint for a daughter was an honor. He means to drown her, I tell them. June begged me to change my father's mind, to keep Felicity from harm. Do not let what happened to you happen to her, she said. Not to her. I couldn't do anything but stand there as she pleaded with me, as she wept in my arms. June had sung the drowning songs alongside every other person in Roe. She knew my fate. She always had. I pushed her away and stumbled back out into the storm. The blizzard was so thick it was impossible to see the lights of the town, but I knew exactly where the river was, and I turned my path toward it. When I came upon my father, he stood on the frozen river, his back to me and his head bent. He held a spade, which he used to make a hole on the ice. A small bundle lay at his feet, moving restlessly. As I came closer, I could hear my father singing. As quickly as I could, I crept my way to them, and snatched Felicity up from the ice. She was unharmed, wrapped warm in her mother's quilt. I pressed her to me and nearly wept with relief. That's when my father turned and saw me. He was not himself. There was a powerful fever in his eyes I had never seen. He continued to sing, even as he came toward me. He wore no coat, no protection against the cold, but he seemed not to feel it. His fingers found the edge of Felicity's quilt, and he tried to pull her from me, but his strength had been sapped from him along with his spirit, for I was able to push him away easily. "Daddy," I said, "please fight her. You gave God too much of your devotion when she did not deserve it. It's your Adeline. Please listen to me." But my father did not recognize me. He did not know me at all. He tried once again to take Felicity from my arms, only this time there was more strength in him, as if his resolve had hardened. To free her from him, I had no choice but to throw the weight of my body against his chest. He stumbled back and his foot slipped. He tried to find his balance again, but the wind chose that moment to rise up in a terrible fury, blinding me with stinging ice. When I opened my eyes again, my father was gone. I screamed and ran to the hole he'd made in the ice, but all I could see was black water as it rushed by underneath. There was no sign of him. I thought I heard hands beating beneath the ice, somewhere downstream. But no matter how much I searched and called my father's name, I could find no sign of him. I began to fear for Felicity being out in this cold. I sat down on the frozen river bank and rocked us back and forth against the cold, kissing her sweet face and trying not to cry. Later there would be time for grieving. Now I had to leave Roe. I tucked Felicity into my coat as best I could. She was beginning to squirm unhappily, as if finally sensing the fate that she had narrowly escaped. I wished I could sing to her, to soothe her. But I knew no songs other than those I swore then I would never sing again. She would not touch the water if she did not wish it. She would never learn the touch of a killer. She would never have to know the feeling of choking and helplessness and worthlessness. Her body would never be river refuse left to wash up on the banks. I would never sing her the drowning songs, not for any temptation, nor any torment. Do you hear me? God, do you hear me?